Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Michael Whitman and I'm hosting my show, which is called the Shrink in Beverly Hills podcast, and we're also going to probably put this on YouTube, so welcome. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist in Beverly Hills, and I have a very special guest with me today, Dr. Leslie Pam, who's been a psychologist for decades, achieved many great things, and is also a great friend. So welcome, Leslie.
Oh, thank you. Good to see you on this nice rainy day.
Yeah. Another rainy day in Los Angeles in
Yeah,
2023.
sure. Yeah, exactly. Amazing. I love it.
Yeah, so...
A great day for depression. Get off, Bill. Good. Start here.
I've talked to people with depression, and sometimes they say they feel better when it rains.
Yeah.
And you don't have an excuse for, it's a good day to sleep for everybody, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I like rainy days.
I like rainy days.
Yeah,
anyways.
and I like to just lock the doors and, just do nothing.
And
It's
give
great.
yourself that.
Oh, it's wonderful. In the world we live in today, your phone's always ringing, your text is going on, you're inundated by, patients calling and all kinds of things going on, and your brain just gets tired.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk today about teenage mental health. I know you've worked with teens. I work with a lot of teens, and I've been really getting concerned, more and more phone calls, more and more statistics. And I want to see if we can, share a little bit of your wisdom with the world and hopefully some of mine. So I'm going to read a couple statistics. The Wall Street Journal says the U.S. suicide rates rose in 2021 after 2 years of decline. Well, that makes sense. 2021 was the heart of the pandemic. What concerned me also a lot was males aged 15 to 24 experienced the sharpest increase at 8%. It's a big increase in suicide rate. It really breaks my heart when these kids are sort of lost, and the pandemic was hard on us as adults, and for kids it must have been even more discombobulating and painful. Okay, in 2020 alone, reports of anxiety and depression in adults rose by more than 25% compared to previous years. That's a huge increase. There's another article that's focused on females. Among girls, 30% said they seriously considering attempting suicide. Double the rate among boys, and up almost 60% from a decade ago. And that was also around this pandemic time. So that's huge. 30% said they seriously considered attempting suicide. Almost 20% of girls report experiencing rape or other sexual violence in the previous year. How can we get better help to these teenage boys and girls in your experience,
Well, teenagers have always been a crisis. It's just a crisis time.
They're already in crisis, right?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, this is my idea where it comes from, because most people love their babies and then, discipline their teenagers. But they've got it backwards. You're supposed to discipline your babies so that you can love them when they're teenagers. So this is the big beginning where the disconnect takes place. There's very few boundaries for babies. They get to do what they want to do. Feel gaga goo goo, they're so cute and loving and whatever. And they don't discipline their children. They don't teach them. It's like a puppy. A puppy wants boundaries. So do little kids. So, they get this unrequited love from their parents, and it's like, and the sense is that there's no one in charge.
Well, I think that boundaries are actually a form of love, and people get that confused.
Yes.
They think if they're being, firm with their boundaries, they're being unloving or unkind, and they get guilty or feel like they're being a bad parent. But actually being a good parent and helping the kid feel safe, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's totally. But we don't learn those things anywhere. I mean, we had parents say, "Look what our parents did to us." I mean, for example, not a great job, and look what I had to do to survive all of that. Had my own therapy and still do all the things I need to do to stay on top of it and evolve.
Yeah.
But really, there's no discussion in our culture about mental health.
Almost none.
It's like zero. I mean, when they shut down the mental hospitals in California, then they shut them down nationally.
Like in the 80s.
Yeah. Where do they go?
Yeah.
They're on the streets.
Yeah, now we're paying for that.
Yeah, we're
society.
big time. Yes, exactly. And people say, "Oh, they're in my neighborhood." Well, these people are people. They're human beings. First of all, we've lost the sense of being a human being. There's no sympathy really for, don't you go do it somewhere else instead of we don't learn anything. I mean, even think about in sex education in school. I know when I was in school, they gave you the details of what takes place, but no one ever discussed what happens when you hit your puberty and you have hormones going on and how your mind is going to change and the power of these things and how to handle it. I think puberty is an opportunity. That's an opportunity to learn about yourself.
Right. So I like this idea of teens are already in crisis throughout time.
Totally.
Because your hormones are changing, you're becoming an adult, you're in this awkward, difficult in-between stage. Your peers become your main group. And peers are very, I think, chimp-like at that age and very competitive and harsh. And so they were already in crisis. Now you have a pandemic and they're looking at the computer all day. They're looking at social media. They're not interacting live. They're not exercising. They're not outside. And it messes with their brain chemistry. And now we're seeing already the fallout from that. And I'm not surprised, as I'm sure you're not, that there's suicidal increase and ideation increase. So it's terrible.
There's a lot of bad things going on right now for kids. And in fact, my wife, who's also a therapist, has a patient who's these people adopted this girl, but she's 15 years old and she's completely out of control and actually beats her father physically. So finally she consented to go in for therapy. And the therapist says she's so attached to that, that pulls you in.
Yeah.
The brainwash, I call it brainwash. You get being brainwashed. That's a great word. I love that's an old-fashioned word, being brainwashed. Yeah. And so the parents said, well, what happens if we tell her she can't, go on her,
addiction.
Addiction. She'll kill herself.
Yeah.
And then this is a problem, and they do kill themselves.
Yeah.
But what they're actually getting into at the time is that they're being disconnected from themselves while they're doing this. So the only salvation is to get to know oneself better, as opposed to losing oneself to some outside source that can control you and influence you. It's supposed to be a time, think about in cave people days, when you were 13 years old and you got your testosterone, you made your first baby,
Yeah.
That's what happened. I mean, there was no slowing down. Now we have all of these restrictions, but there's no compensation it's just not a national issue at all. It's unbelievable. They call us the greatest country in the world. Well, we've missed out on the best part of what life is, where the transition from being a baby into teenagers, these are the future leaders and the future people that are going to run the world.
Right.
And we're not doing a great job. It makes me nervous to think about somebody that's doing this all day that's going to run for president someday.
Yeah.
In about 3 generations, and what goes on in their mind.
You know what? I think this point about the homeless you made, there's an analogy, a parallel I just thought of, which is you have a problem with not taking care and educating kids, and then they end up, some of them, homeless or very distraught, and we don't take care of them. And then if you don't set boundaries with kids, they can be very raucous teenagers, and by that time it is very hard to put boundaries in the home and rules because you've lost your authority as a parent. And so I don't think the parent should be the friend. They can be close at times, but they ultimately have to have a little bit of a authority that the kid knows.
Yeah, well,
right?
the parent is here to teach how to survive in this world.
Right.
The first thing I tell my patients that, they're all young people at this point, and I tell them life gets harder as you get older, not easier. So, transferring from babyhood to teenagerdom is going to be a difficult situation. And then at around 22 years of age, there's this crisis that takes place where the loneliness sets in, the disconnect sets in, the distance sets in.
Yeah.
If you think about this, the parents lost access to their children. How could that possibly be? They've lost access. The kid hits teenage and all of a sudden the friends are more important than the parents. They think the parents are stupid. I remember thinking my parents were stupid. So this is what we have to deal with the kids is their anger. They're really angry. That's
really hurting.
They're really angry. Well, they're hurt. They haven't learned, my old story, what is the duty of a parent when the baby's born is to teach them how to connect language to their feelings. And I work with a lot of young people who have kids and, I'm fighting with my 3-year-old. and I tell them, teach them how to use language to describe their feelings. Well, how do I do that? I said, well, tell them how you feel.
Right.
Describe, model. And so they'll come back 2 weeks later and say, I'm having conversations with my 3-year-old. I can't believe it. I'm not yelling and screaming at him.
Yeah.
And he's talking to me and telling me how we're having adult conversations. I said, he's staring at you. He knows you better than you know him. You're busy and being distracted. All he's got is there's daddy and there's mommy.
So Leslie, I wanted to talk a little bit more, because these are young adults. I thought you made a really interesting point about 22, 23, 21. Those can be really tough ages.
Yeah.
So not just teens, but young, they're kind of adolescents also.
Right.
Early 20s, now college is often over. Like 60% now move back home for a number of reasons.
Right.
And the structure of college and high school is gone. And now how do you build a life? And so especially if you haven't been prepared well with mental health or boundaries and other ways. And so I think that's an important point, that they're part of the adolescent group too, that's hurting a lot. And the pandemic had to be hard on them, because it's hard to sit still when you're 21 years old, 22 years old, and be inside all day. It was hard on us, I think, but for young people, I think it really bashed their mental health.
Well, I think that the parents let the kids down.
Yeah.
Because they saw what happened to the parents. The parents went into the bad place first.
Yeah.
The kids just went, wait a minute, and all of a sudden, new roles for you. There is no preparation for any of this. My mother pounded this into me. Rainy day. There's going to be many rainy days in your life, and you better be prepared for a rainy day. It's going to come, and it's going to come and go. It's like the stock market. It's going to go up, and then it's going to go down. Then it's going to go up, and it's going to go down. Your relationship with your significant others, you're going to have, in the beginning, wow, oh my God, I found the perfect person. Oops, I'm not the perfect person. And then you go like this, and you go through life kind of up and down, and you figure out all the different things that happen to you along the way. It's really problem solving.
Well, I think it's also, this too shall pass, so that means the good times will pass, like you said, in an early relationship.
Yeah.
That phase will pass.
Yeah, definitely.
You get the great job with the great income. It's usually is not linear. Then there's going to be a hard time with your business.
Exactly.
And then you have to bounce back from things, because I think your mom gave you a good lesson there. Yeah,
so where did the kids learn that lesson?
Yeah.
Did your parents, I remember I had a young patient, and she says, I'm learning how to do, we're discussing what it costs to live in this world.
Yeah.
I said, so what did you do? She's like, created a budget. I said, well, do you know how much your parents spend on you? No. I said, why don't you ask them? Oh, I couldn't do that. See, the parents never really discuss anything.
So I want to say that in our schools, I think we're not teaching a lot of the important things. So not only is it not being taught at home, but in the schools they're not teaching anger management, how to manage your money, sex education is very little. Taxes, just how to become an adult, because we're supposed to be preparing these kids for adulthood so they can thrive, but we're really not teaching them what they need, the skills to survive. And then a tragedy happens, like the pandemic, and then they're even more decimated because they haven't been prepared for, like you said, the vicissitudes of life, let's say.
Yeah. Do you remember opening your first checking account?
Yes, it was much too late in life.
Yeah.
Much too late in life. And I asked my roommate, where do you go to open a bank account?
Thank you.
Because I don't know how to do this.
How could that not? There's a million things like that happen to you.
Yeah.
That they're protecting you against the reality of the things they're going to be dealing with in their life, and yet they have no experience dealing with it. They never get taught these things.
Yeah, so it's a great disservice if you're too protective of your child without preparing them.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one of the problems. Or neglecting your kids.
Right.
I call protecting them is neglecting them.
Right.
So that's one of my statements,
Right. And you don't let them if you're overprotective, you infantilize them and don't let them try being adult and doing adult things. So, one of the good things for me that I did have in my childhood was I started a part-time job working at a tennis club when I was like 16, checking people in on the courts. It was $4 an hour. But it made me feel like I can interact with adults. It got me out of my shell. I was even more shy then. Mm-hmm. And I'd say, oh, hi, Joe Smith, what court do you want? Okay, write in. Take a phone message. We had real phones back then. Yeah. But it was a good exercise for me in trying the adult world out for a kind of low-stakes job. What was your first job?
I was industrious as a child. I had a number of little businesses starting at the age of, let's say, 12. The bicycle shop, we repaired all the bicycles in the kids' neighborhood. We did a variety of things, gardening, babysitting. I put on magic shows, charged people a nickel. I was always interested in, trying things out. We made our own skateboards out of old lumber, so we, learned how to use tools and whatever. So that's really. But my first job was working as a cook. Yeah, as a fry cook in a cafeteria, and then they moved me into the regular chef's position on the weekend, and that was my first job. Yeah,
Nice.
It's like, then they fired me from that job actually at the time. They said you're talking too much, which I do now. Can't shut me up.
I learned these French expressions, and one of them was "le plus ça change." You know any French? Le plus ça change, le plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah.
They just say it so well.
Yeah.
How do people who are afraid to try different businesses or ideas or talk to women and whatever the person has, getting over your fears? How have you tried so many different things with it seems like less fear than the average person by a good deal of margin?
Yeah. Well, it's a two-part story. So, being the little quiet kid I was, I went out for after-school sports in junior high school. And it was baseball season. I never swung at the ball, ever. I was afraid that I would strike out and everybody would make fun of me.
Right.
But I knew I could walk the bases.
Yeah.
The pitching was terrible.
Yeah.
The last game of the last day, the ball counts. I don't know why I did this. I hit that ball further than anybody had ever hit the ball.
No way.
And I ran around. I was at halfway past second, and I go, I should go back, but I know I'm going to go. They're going to tag me up. I don't want to see how far I get. I don't care what happens. And they tagged me out. So I came back to the thing, and the guys go, "Where have you been all year, man?" And I tell people that story, number one, and then I tell them the things that you have to. You have to seek something inside that doesn't make sense to anybody except yourself.
Yeah.
So I just tell them the story.
Yeah.
So I'm a kid reading a Donald Duck comic book. This is a true story, 5th grade. And at the end of the story, in a comic book, there's a little 4 thing at the bottom, and he has a cousin called Gladstone Gander, who's kind of a ne'er-do-well guy, and he's got a little hat and a cane, and he's always listening. Donald hates him because he seems like he's so lucky. And so Donald goes, "Oh, here comes my, ne'er-do-well cousin, Gladstone." And Gladstone, "Oh, hi, Donald." And all of a sudden, he slips on a banana peel. So Donald runs up and says, "Ha, ha, ha, he slipped on a banana peel." And Gladstone said, "Yeah, but there was a $5 bill underneath there." And you know what I identified with that at that moment? I said, "I'm Gladstone Gander. I am Gladstone Gander." And this is a silly, crazy story, but I'm telling you, it changed my life.
That's awesome.
I knew who I was. I knew I was a lucky guy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I just didn't know where it came from. Now I have different ideas about where that comes from, but without getting into that. But that's what I tell them. And then what I always do is I will make a suggestion that's so absurd.
Right.
So for the guys that go, "I can't talk to great-looking women." I go, "You don't have to do that. Here's the homework assignment. I want you to, when you see little girls and old ladies, go up to them and say, 'Hi, how are you? You look so cute today in that dress.' 'Oh, you look nice.'" Start with the thing that is, there's plenty of experience to have. You don't have to go right for the top of the mountain here.
Right, practice talking
practice
friendly
and being friendly. Yeah, thank you. And that's what I do.
Right.
And they always
work up to the girl you're attracted to.
Yeah, and you work up to it. You have to lose your fear.
Yeah.
I have to help people lose their fear. That's mainly what my job is as a therapist. People are afraid.
Right.
It's like they're not connected to themselves, and their soul is not connected to the earth and to this wonderful, incredible life that we've been given. This is a miracle.
When I get afraid of trying something, what helps me sometimes is I think, pretty soon I'm going to be dead, and this person or this situation will be past and gone. So the pressure is not, it's not life or death. I'm already going to die. So I may as well just swing the bat in whatever situation
Yeah.
it is and see what happens.
Exactly. I was petrified to speak
Sure.
when I was a little kid.
You were.
Yeah, my father was pretty brutal, and there was, I was called stupid. It's like the smartest kid in school. What can I say? It's just
Yeah.
they call me crybaby. I was open to my feelings, and I was just super sensitive and
Yeah.
so on. And
I was too.
yeah, it was horrible. I always felt self-conscious. I didn't want people to notice me, and pretty much was a loner, and so on. And I had a lot of therapy.
Yeah.
They say, "Doctor, go heal thyself and practice what you preach." I mean,
That's great.
that's where it started. I know.
I'm the same way. I've had a lot of therapy. It's been so integral to my, growth, development, healing, all that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I think that I get concerned about therapists who say I never went to therapy or I went for a very, very short time because I'm like, oh, that makes me a little concerned.
Yeah, I know therapists that when I was in training, I was at the VA hospital for a year, and a lot of the guys were, had already completed their schooling and all this stuff, and I go, how did you get to be a psychologist? Oh, I was a math major. Then I'd say, did you ever have any therapy? No. It just made me nervous.
Yeah.
I was working with the guys from Vietnam.
Okay.
This was like a hell of a learning experience.
Yeah.
So.
My first internship was at the Oakland VA. So I worked with the vets there, but I worked at the prisons, as you know.
Yes.
A couple of the psychologists there, they were having a hard time with something. I said, well, are you in therapy? And they say, no, I'll just get some antidepressants. That's really not how we should be thinking of these things as therapists, but I'm not going to tell you what to do.
Yeah. They probably weren't real happy about your comments.
Yeah, I kept those to myself. This was an internal dialogue.
Okay.
Yeah. But they may have read my face, I don't know.
Yeah. They knew what you were thinking.
Maybe.
Sometimes silence is a better way of conveying information to people.
Silence is really powerful, right?
Yeah, very powerful.
So I want to ask a little bit more about teenagers and parents, because I recently met with some parents and their kid was, I would say, in a major depression, and it's not the only teen I'm seeing who's in a major depression, like different than teenage angst.
Yeah.
Really having trouble just functioning, barely getting through the day,
Mhm.
and taking psych meds and doing therapy. And so, I think some of those basic things like we talked about, part-time jobs, getting outside, messing up, were helpful to me, even though it was still hard in the teenage years. So do you have any advice for parents who have a depressed teen or a very depressed teen, not just a little teenage angst, about, well, how can we help this group that's kind of lagging? I even read this study that the brains of teens who went through the pandemic are different than the brain of it. If you ask a teen now and scan it, their brains have even changed.
Mhm.
Hopefully it comes back, we don't know.
Mhm.
But it's been damaged.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's been altered, let's say.
Yeah.
And so the brain adjusts to what's going on.
Yeah.
So the brain has a new reality. Now, how do you enter into that reality? So, I remember I had a 4-year-old, and his mother brought him in for therapy with her. And she says he hits